Other than the interest in Samuel Ball, the human being, there is a little bit of a glimmer that he was a little bit more than meets the eye.
The freedman who owned Oak Island's Lot 8 was born into slavery, and by the time he died, he was one of the richest men in the province. That same lot is the most fought-over patch of dirt on the island right now. The team hoisted a boulder weighing roughly 40,000 pounds off it to reach a fitted stone cradle buried underneath, and Marty Lagina is down in the trench beside it with the whole crew leaning over the hole.
Back in the day, it would have been a massive undertaking, so it's very exciting as to why this thing was placed there and what on earth is underneath it.
2 centuries before any of them arrived, this exact ground belonged to a man who came to the island with nothing. How does a person travel that far? The lot everyone's fighting over. In Season 13, the team's whole attention narrowed onto one piece of ground. They call it Lot 8. The boulder sitting on top of it was so heavy it took serious equipment just to move it aside. And what they found underneath was a fitted stone cradle, a worked feature that doesn't look natural. Marty Lagina opened a trench right next to it. Hammer drill cores came back so soft that the team's archaeologists judged they couldn't be natural bedrock. Before the season closed, Marty Lagina left a maple leaf gold coin sitting at the spot to mark where they'd pick the dig back up. This is the most expensive obsession on the island. The strange part isn't down in the hole. It's in the paperwork. Lot 8, the single hottest target of the entire search, was once owned by a man named Samuel Ball. And the closer you look at him, the harder it gets to explain how a man who began with nothing ended up holding the most fought-over dirt on Oak Island. A man who started with nothing. Samuel Ball was born into slavery in South Carolina around 1764. He was a child on a plantation, with no property of his own, and no path to freedom that anyone of his time would have bet on. The American Revolution changed that. The British offered freedom to enslaved people who would leave the rebel colonies and side with the crown, and Ball took the offer. When the war was lost, he was one of thousands of black loyalists who went north into British Nova Scotia rather than stay behind. He carried the surname of the master he had left, the common pattern for freed men of that generation. His path ran through Shelburne first, the era's largest black loyalist landing, then on to Chester, and finally to the island. The promise of land that drew those loyalists north was rarely kept in full. Shelburne in those years was crowded, the better parcels went to white settlers, and a lot of free black families arrived to find far less than they'd been told. Many moved again, some all the way to Africa, looking for ground that would finally hold. Ball stayed in Nova Scotia and kept going, which by itself sets him apart from a great many people who started exactly where he did. He arrived with almost nothing and started growing cabbages. That's the honest beginning. A freed man with a patch of ground and a crop most people wouldn't look at twice. And yet by the end of his life, Samuel Ball owned more of Oak Island than anyone. The simplest and hardest question hangs over the rest of his story. How? What the ground gave up? The team didn't just read about Samuel Ball, they dug up his home. In Season 8, the crew excavated Ball's homestead, and the dirt handed back the texture of a real working life. They pulled 6 King George II copper coins out of the ground, the everyday currency of an established household. Alex Lagina recovered a British naval officer's button near the foundation of Ball's house, a uniform piece dating to the early 1800s. Off one of his waterfront lots, the team found the remains of a wharf, which tells you Ball was moving goods by water. Gary Drayton's metal detector added lead and musket parts, the ordinary hardware of an armed colonial farm. Take those finds together, and a picture forms that has nothing to do with buried gold. The coins point to a household that paid its way in real currency. The wharf belongs to a man who shipped his crop to market instead of eating it. He was running a genuine commercial operation, shipping cabbage and cattle, not scratching out a meal on a subsistence plot. Threaded through all of it is the land record itself. From the mid-1780s onward, Ball bought parcel after parcel until he became the single largest landowner on the island. By around 1810, his holdings had grown to include the Money Pit ground, the most famous dirt on Oak Island, sitting on paper inside a former slave's name. There was even a hired hand working his land, the kind of detail that tells you this was an operation with real labor behind it. So where does the idea of buried treasure even come from? And does farming really account for this much? The math that actually explains it. New World land in that era was cheap, and Ball worked his for more than 50 years. A patient, shrewd buyer who keeps compounding small purchases across half a century can die rich without ever lifting a single coin out of the island. A man who buys the ground other people overlook and keeps doing it for decades ends up owning a great deal of ground. That really is most of the answer. 50 years is most of an adult life. A man who lands with a cabbage patch in his 30s and keeps acquiring into his 70s has decades for land values to climb, and for each good harvest to fund the next small purchase, plus the simple advantage of staying put while his neighbors moved on. It's the unglamorous engine of nearly every old fortune, and on its own it carries Samuel Ball a remarkably long way toward where the record finds him. One detail, though, the tidy version can't quite swallow. As it's told, Ball once paid a steep premium, somewhere around £8, for a small parcel of Oak Island, when that same money would have bought him perhaps 20 times as much land on the mainland. If that's true, he wasn't simply buying more acreage. He was paying extra to own a piece of this specific island. That detail is reported lore rather than anything settled in a courthouse record, so hold it lightly. But it's the crack the legend pours through. The whispered version of Ball's life says his wealth wasn't really about cabbage and patience at all. The legend says he found something out here. Some tellings go further and put him behind the famous 90-foot stone, the inscribed slab pulled from the money pit generations ago. That's folklore. It's the question his success invites, not an answer the show has ever reached. The record says land and time. The legend says the island knew something. Where the legend loses its grip. The fitted stone cradle under Lot 8, the marquee target of the whole season, has been dated by the show to a medieval horizon, centuries before Samuel Ball was ever born. He didn't build it. There's no sign he ever knew it was there. Whatever that feature is, it sat in the ground long before a freed loyalist farmer bought the lot above it. The easy version, the one where Ball found the cradle or carved the stone or buried a fortune, runs straight into the calendar and stops. What's left is the more interesting thing. A man who began life as someone else's property and who by ordinary arithmetic had no business dying wealthy, did exactly that. The mystery isn't a chest in the ground. It's the size of the gap between where Samuel Ball started and where he finished, and the one stubborn detail, that reported premium, that keeps you from closing the case entirely. The premium doesn't prove treasure. It just refuses to fully dissolve into the cabbage and land explanation, the same way the cradle under the boulder refuses to be only a rock. Both of them sit slightly outside the tidy story, and both are part of why the team keeps coming back to this exact lot rather than any of the others Ball once held. 200 years on the same ground. The documented facts alone are remarkable. A man born into slavery died at 81 years old in December of around 1846 as one of the richest men in the province. The home the team excavated came back genuinely prosperous. The land record made him the island's largest owner, the money pit parcel itself among his holdings. None of that is legend. A child with no name of his own becomes a free man with a surname, then a landholder, then the largest landholder on an island that would one day draw treasure hunters from around the world. That arc would be remarkable in any century. It happens to belong to a man most people had never heard of, until a History Channel crew started digging up his fields. And the lot the team has been obsessing over this season, the one with the cradle and Marty Lagina's trench and the soft cores, was his lot. The feature beneath it predates him by centuries, so this was never about Ball burying anything. What converges here isn't treasure. The most documented success story on the island and the most mysterious dig on the island are standing on the same ground, 200 years apart, and that ground carries one man's name. All the cameras and heavy equipment and elemental testing pouring into Lot 8 is happening on a parcel that a formerly enslaved farmer added to his holdings while he was alive. He walked that ground and worked it, and counted it among the lots that made him the biggest landowner anyone here had seen. He had no idea a fitted stone cradle sat waiting beneath it, and no idea that 2 centuries later his lot would become the thing the whole search circled back to. What he actually left behind. Samuel Ball's fortune was almost certainly built the hard way. He seized his freedom in a war that could have cost him everything, then rebuilt a whole life from a cabbage patch on an unfamiliar coast. After that came 50 years of buying the ground nobody else wanted until he held more of Oak Island than anyone alive. The treasure version stays exactly where it belongs, as the legend his success invites, and the island has never confirmed. It's a good story. It just isn't the one the record tells. But his name is on the lot the team is digging right now, and that's the thread that pulls forward. This island keeps passing from one set of hands to the next, across 2 full centuries, from the people who own it now toward whoever comes after them. Which raises the bigger question of who carries this search forward at all? Who inherits Oak Island when the people leading the dig today finally step back? That question of how the whole operation gets handed down once the current generation steps away from the whole is waiting for you next.